Alright, I am Tahuti Kepara Iteru. Now this video right here, I just wanted to do a quick video decoding the movie X-Men Apocalypse, right? Now normally I wouldn't do an outright video like this decoding the movie, but I've seen other videos, or one in particular, right, where a brother was decoding the movie, but again, he just missed most of the key elements, right? But back then, at the time when the movie came out, I never watched it. I never really had time to watch it, but I had time to watch it now. So I thought, let's do a proper decoding of the movie, right? So again, let's just get straight into this, right? So now, at the beginning of the movie, it says that it was set in Egypt 3100 BC. But when they showed you inside the temple that Apocalypse was in, right? When they showed you the temple, you saw a statue of the god Set, right? A statue of the god Set. But in dynastic Egypt, Set was the bad guy, right? So Set was not, he was not worshipped. He wasn't worshipped like that, right? So he was the bad guy. But pre-dynastic Egypt, Set was the patron deity, right? Set was the patron deity in pre-dynastic Egypt. You see? So those scenes that you saw at the start of the movie, even though it may seem like dynastic, right? Even though it may seem, so yeah, even though it may seem like dynastic, those were actually pre-dynastic, right? That was actually pre-dynastic, right? Also, what Bobby Hemmett speaks about was that he said that, I think he said that Manetho, right? Or basically somebody asked the Egyptians, who used to rule before you? And they said a whole bunch of gods, right? A whole bunch of gods used to rule, right? So again, when you see it starting the movie, now you see all those mutants, right? That's because that's how it was in those times. So we're talking pre-dynastic. We're talking up to 50,000 years ago. That was going down. A whole bunch of gods. You see. So those real mutants used to walk the earth. But again, we'll get into that. We'll show you who the real mutants are. We'll get into this. So now check this out right here. Now, a lot of people may have missed this part, right? So there was a scene in the classroom, and the teacher said the first mutants were found in the Vietnam War, right? The first mutants were found in the Vietnam War. But for those people who are into the knowledge, right, you know that the Vietnam War was when they first found out that the pineal gland had function, right? That's when they first found out. Prior to that point, they thought the pineal gland had no function because it was calcified in them. Then in the Vietnam War, they started to cut open these black soldiers, and they realized that, wait a second, this gland has function. It was functioning. So when they say that the Vietnam War was when they first found out about mutants, what they're trying to say here is that the pineal gland is the mutant, right? The pineal gland is the mutant. The awakened pineal gland is the alien, you see. But again, the pineal gland is the seat of the soul. So again, we'll go into this. So now, I want to talk about the history of Apocalypse real quick. So again, he mentioned how he was the first mutant, right? And he survived over thousands of years. Right? So he survived over thousands of years by placing his consciousness into other mutants, right? And taking their powers. But it says that he was reborn, but in the movie he was reborn to a new Egypt, or a new world that was set in 1983, right? And he has been asleep since ancient times. And the current world that he sees, the current state that he sees the world in, he's not happy with it. He's not happy with the world, right? You see, and he wants to. So then, after that, he goes searching for these four horsemen, these four mutants that will help him essentially destroy the world. And the four horsemen that he finds is Magneto, Storm, some guy with wings, and this kind of a girl with kind of psychic, energetic powers, right? But see, when he finds Magneto, Magneto asks him, "Who are you?" And he says, "Over the years, I have been called Elohim, Shen, Ra." Right? He said that when the plants die, though he says something along the lines of, when plants die and they are to be reborn, that is him, right? But again, this links to something I've mentioned in other videos, which is that an extract from the Egyptian creation story B from the book Legends of Egyptian Gods by Wallace E. Burge. It says that, okay, so again, by Wallace E. Burge, it says that these are the words of the god Nebecher. But again, Nebecher, which I've spoken about, is a physical representation of the waters of Nu. So this is the waters of Nu speaking directly. I am the creator of what have come into being, and I form myself. No, and I myself came into being under the form of the god Khepera, and I came into being under primeval time. I came into being under the form of the god Khepera, right? And I came into being in primeval time. I came into being in the form of the god Khepera, and I am the creator of what have come into being. That is to say, I formed myself out of the primeval matter, and I made and formed myself out of the substance which existed in primeval time. My name is Asa, who is the primeval matter of primeval matter, right? So again, I've mentioned this before, and I keep mentioning this right here. This part is key. At the end of the passage, it says, my name is Asa, who is the primeval matter of primeval matter, right? But the god Khepera made and formed himself from that same primeval matter. But the god Asa represents your soul. So in so many words, your soul is Ra, right? Your soul is Ra. So when Apocalypse says, I have been called Elohim, Ra, in so many words, what this means is that Apocalypse represents the soul, which was the first mutant, which was here in the beginning, right? But he's also called Apocalypse, which is referring to how the soul is here in the beginning and will be here in the end, right? So now, going deeper into this now, right? So now going deeper into this, now we're going to talk about where the four horsemen come in now. So in the movie, he finds these four mutants that he wants to, take on his team, right? And he enhances all of their powers, right? Implying that he's already connected to them, you see. But in the movie, he doesn't amplify any of the other mutants' powers except Charles Xavier, right? Charles Xavier. So essentially, the four horsemen represent the four expressions of the soul, the four powers of the soul, or the four primary powers of the soul on Earth, right? Which is flight, control of magnetism, control of the weather, and energy manipulation. You see, so these are the powers of the soul on Earth, the primary powers right now, right? But now, if we fast forward to the end now, in the end of the movie now, he gets Magneto to destroy part of the Lammas using his magnetic powers, and he rebuilds a form of ancient Egypt, right? But the key part about this was that exactly how the pyramids were built in the movie is exactly how the pyramids were built in real life, right? This is exactly how it took place, but it may sound far-fetched to some, right? Hence why they pull it in their comic book film. But we know that science fiction is science fact, right? So again, in the movie, when you saw all these things floating, that's exactly how it was in Egypt. You know what I'm saying? Shit was floating. You see what I'm saying? Because again, that is the only way you could stack stones weighing tons on top of each other. That's the only way, right? Shit was floating, right? So again, but I go also in the movie now, Magneto was in the air, right? And he was creating some type of magnetic field, right? So he was creating some type of magnetic field. But if you notice, the type of magnetic field that he was creating was a type of toroidal field, right? Some type of toroidal field, which is the same type of magnetic field that the heart produces, right? That same type of field that the heart produces in the body. So, what Magneto represents in this sense is the magnetic field that the pyramids of Giza was producing when online. So we're saying what the pyramids produced when they were online, the magnetic field that it produced. You see. And again, this is something that I spoke about in my video on the pyramids when I did the video about the pyramids, right? But also, there was no coincidence that the huge battle that took place between the mutants took place in the area where this magnetic field was being produced, right? So again, this links to my video Pyramid Science, and I spoke about how when the pyramids were online, it produced this magnetic field, right? Matter and people underneath this magnetic field were no longer bound to the regular laws of physics, right? So the things you saw in the movie in that final battle were the things that were going on in Egypt 50,000 years ago, right? When those pyramids were online, you see. But now here we're gonna go even deeper now. So now there was a scene where Charles Xavier used Cerebro to contact with Magneto, right? And then Apocalypse, he noticed that, so he noticed what Magneto was doing. He's talking to somebody, and Apocalypse tapped into his mind and used him to make contact with all the military bases around the world. And you notice a scene where he tapped into the military bases and shot all the nukes, right, into space, right? But if you notice though, when he first took control of Professor X, his eyes went black, right? His eyes went black, meaning that the retina of the eye enveloped the whole eye, right? But we know that the retina of the eye is layered with melanin. This is why your eyes are brown, right? It's layered with melanin, you see? So, but again, when his eyes went black, he said, I have never felt power like this. I have never felt power like this, right? So what they're trying to tell you is that melanin is the power, right? Your superpowers is melanin, right? Melanin is the mutant. So again, this is what they're trying to say right here. I've never felt power like this because melanin is the power. All right. So now, if we fast forward to the end of the movie now, he took Charles Xavier and wanted to use his mind to send a message to people all over the world, right? But Xavier said he can't do it because he doesn't have Cerebro. So he doesn't have that machine, right? Cerebro. But Apocalypse said, you have me. You know what I'm saying? You have me, right? But again, Apocalypse represents the soul. So it means, so what it essentially means that technology is primitive, right? It's primitive. So again, which is something I spoke about in my pyramid video, right? And the soul is more advanced. But again, it goes even deeper because even with Cerebro, he could never reach the entire planet. He could only reach a few mutants, few people here and there. He could never reach the entire planet. So, but the fact that he was able to do this with the help of Apocalypse shows how the soul is more advanced than the technology, right? But Cerebro was the most advanced technology in that realm. That was some of the most advanced technology in that realm. So it shows how the soul is more advanced than the highest form of technology in the whole entire galaxy, right? The soul is more advanced. You see? So now when you go to the end of the movie now, so now in the final scene of the movie, which is probably the deepest part of the whole movie, right? Was when Apocalypse wanted to transfer his consciousness into Professor X, right? So he took him into the pyramid, right, and placed him next to him, right, to begin the process, the transferring process. But then Nightcrawler teleported into the pyramid and took Professor X before the process could be completed. But then, after he was taken out, Apocalypse said to Professor X, we are connected now. We are connected, right? So it shows you one of the main functions of the pyramids of Giza, which again I spoke about in my pyramid video, which was extraterrestrial communication, right? But again, they encoded it good. I like the way they did it right there, right? They encoded it well, right? So again, most people wouldn't have caught that part, right? Because they were both in the pyramid, right? And then when they took them out the pyramid, when the process was interrupted and they were taken out the pyramid, they had this mind link, this strong mind link. So, and they were so it's almost like they were essentially one. So what they're trying to say is that the pyramid was an ancient beacon, some kind of ancient transmitter that one could transmit their consciousness from one place to the next, like an electromagnetic carrier wave, right? So again, this is what they said, and again, I spoke about this in my pyramid video, right? So again, so now at the end of the movie, now the final scene, they wanted to defeat Apocalypse, right? But he was too powerful. So then Magneto came in and helped subdue Apocalypse, but even then they couldn't defeat him, right? Then Jean, with the power of the Phoenix, came close to defeating him, but then he was about to escape, right? But then finally Storm came in, right, and helped. So Storm came in and helped, and then he was defeated, right? But again, Apocalypse represents the soul. But in reality, the soul cannot be defeated, right? But again, for the purposes of the plot and the purposes of the movie, he had to be defeated, right? But what it shows was that he was only defeated because of the help of Magneto and Storm. So this was the only reason why he was defeated. So, but as I spoken about before, is that Storm and Magneto are the two of the four horsemen. But the four horsemen represent the expressions of the soul, the powers of the soul. So in so many words, what they're trying to say is that the soul is so powerful to a point where the only thing that can defeat it is the soul itself. The only thing that can defeat the soul is itself, right? So that is the key right there. All right, so that's pretty much it right here. So in closing, I just want to say that Apocalypse represents the immortal soul in every black man and black woman, right? And it shows how the soul was here in the beginning and will be here in the end, right? Also, the movie represents how the white man knows that all of this must come to an end. This whole reality must come to an end, right? And it all must be destroyed and brought back to the beginning, right? Now, lastly, I just want to quickly touch on how Apocalypse represents what a true God would be like on Earth, right? Because again, you have the movie Batman vs Superman, right? But again, I've seen that movie too, but I ain't gonna decode that movie because again, it's not that deep, right? It's not that deep. But I mention it because a lot of black people now, they're saying now that Superman is us and Superman is referring to us, right? But based on the Batman vs Superman movie, it shows how the Superman is not us. He's not us, because what you gotta understand is that it shows in the movie how Superman has human emotions, right? He had human emotion. He was in love with Lois Lane, right? He was in love with Lois Lane, right? And also, there was a scene in the movie where he came to court, so he felt guilt. God doesn't feel no guilt. You see what I'm saying? He felt guilt and came to court. So a real God would never even stepped in that courtroom. So again, it shows these human characteristics right here. These human characteristics, right? But black people, we are Apocalypse, right? But again, and the difference here is that, for example, Superman had to fly everywhere, right? He has to fly everywhere. But if you notice in the movie Apocalypse, you see what I'm saying? He was instantly transported to the places he wanted to go to, right? So he would just appear. You see what I'm saying? He was instantly transported there, right? And Superman, he has to engage in physical fights, right? He has to engage in physical fights. Whereas Apocalypse now, he would simply look at his victims and they would vanish. So what we're talking about here is a completely different class of beings right here. There's a gap here, a completely different class of beings here. That's what we're dealing with here. So my message to the brothers out there, don't degrade yourself by putting yourself on the level of Superman, right? You are beyond Superman, right? You are Apocalypse. Alright, so that's pretty much the end of the video. Alright, black people. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you took some good information from this. Alright, black people. Thanks for watching.